Hello everyone, and welcome to the maiden episode of the Biotech podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about climate solutions. And joining us for this conversation is Pratap Raju, who is the founding partner at the Climate Collective. They work with entrepreneurs and startups in the climate tech and clean tech space to help them find funding, resources, and other support that they need to become successful ventures. And we're really happy to have Pratap here with us. So maybe we can start off with you telling us, Pratap, what do you do for work and how do you spend your sort of professional time? What keeps you busy?
Hi, Kavya. Hi, everyone. Thank you for this. It's always good to talk to more people, especially in the science community. We need more solutions, especially science-based solutions. So, how do I keep busy? I'll give a small anecdote. I was in Maldives and in this one boot camp. I'm a startup coach as well in what I do at the Climate Collective. And there was a break, and one of the entrepreneurs there came to me and said, "Wait, you go around to all these places, meet people who are doing interesting, innovative things, and you tell them kind of your life story in work and otherwise, and you're calling that a job." And it was kind of funny because that is somewhat what I do, and it's not clear that it is a job because I enjoy it so much. Working at the Climate Collective, what we do, we support entrepreneurs in the climate space. Those entrepreneurs, especially who focus on technology with scalable solutions, and those who are based in the global south. So we help them, as you mentioned, Kavya, with capacity training. Often our entrepreneurs in this space don't come from a business background. In fact, most do not. So they have to encounter new things like marketing, finance, even management. A lot of our entrepreneurs in here in India and in South Asia are first-time entrepreneurs as well. Besides that, of course, all entrepreneurs need money, need to raise funds. So we help them with our fundraising platforms, as well as our own internal fund that's being set up right now. And then we try to do the last bit, third part of maybe how we can look at the Climate Collective is we connect them to clients. Most of these are corporate clients. This is where most of our solution is happening here in India that we work with, at least. So we help them get those first crucial commercial pilots with corporates or with electric utilities, discoms, or other organizations that help kind of demonstrate what their solution can do on the ground and help kind of build the seeds for their growth going forward.
It's clean tech and climate tech, is it? Are there specific industries that you sort of focus on when it comes to finding and helping these people?
So clean tech, climate tech, it's quite funny because today climate tech is perhaps the fourth or fifth or maybe even third largest startup sector in the world. $80 billion goes into climate tech, the startup world, I should say, each year. Wow. Something close to 20 to 30%, 20 to 25%. Yet there's confusion even in the community between the terms clean tech and climate tech. In fact, half the time when I go meet people here, I tell them we support climate tech startups. And often people ask me, well, do you also work with EVs, electric vehicle startups? And in fact, that is the biggest thing we do. So maybe a quick taxonomy, we define clean tech as any kind of solution that has a sustainability impact, right? And primarily it's GHG, greenhouse gases. But we take the wider term to also think about environmental impact so that we can include solutions like in waste or pollution. Of course, as you know, Kavya, as a scientist, everything always has energy embedded, so we can always link it back to climate change. But I think sometimes when we think about litter on the ground, plastic waste that gets into oceans, people don't connect that back to climate change as much as waste or maybe more technically things like circularity, etc. So we take a wide definition. It goes from energy efficiency, a little bit of energy access, meaning there's lots of India and Asia where people don't get access to energy, even today. Electric vehicles, carbon credits, those things that we used to have, but it's growing in very interesting ways today. We don't do too much carbon capture sequestration. That's not a big technology area in India or Asia, and especially so in the startup world.
Mm-hmm.
And then on the circularity side, we look on areas, as I mentioned, on waste, and especially plastic waste, pollution, water, and a big area that doesn't sometimes also gets confused with climate tech, or at least overlaps. A lot of solutions for agriculture are climate tech or climate smart agriculture solutions. Solar-based cold storage, as an example. So we try to reduce the energy component in agriculture as well. So the term climate tech or clean tech is quite wide.
Yep, yep.
Yes.
Very expansive, covers a lot of different industries and future industries, I guess. The space is also changing so much very quickly, so a lot of excitement there. What actually qualifies as a climate solution? How would you define the term climate solution? It involves two very sort of heavy words. So maybe you could tell us what that actually means.
Without trying to settle a still ongoing debate in the ecosystem. So very, very broadly, it's a solution that has a sustainability impact. And maybe very technically, in a large portion of the solutions that we work with, GHG, whether it reduces the amount of GHGs that are emitted, greenhouse gases. We also look at areas like environmental degradation or impact of biodiversity. Those are much harder to measure. There are methodologies out there for example, ecosystem services or impact for sure, but they're at early stage. But intuitively, we do know what solutions go into it, even if it's sometimes harder to measure when we move away from something as somewhat easier like GHGs, right? So that's the climate side, and that's when I gave the taxonomy earlier of all the different kinds of domains that could fit in. Solar panels,
Yeah,
our climate solution, renew, the solar plants and windmills. We don't, as a climate collective, we don't focus on them. We work focus on the technology side.
mm-hmm.
So, for example, today there may be many solar developers putting up plants. The startups we work with, for example, would be devising or developing data analytics to make those plants more efficient, solar hybrid, like solar battery design tools that can help kind of bring in batteries into these plants, robots that can help clean panels without labor, which is sometimes useful in remote areas or even on buildings, but also reduce the water needed to clean panels. So that part of the, let's say, the renewable energy side, we focus on the technology side.
All right. And you did mention earlier biodiversity and the natural element of climate solutions. Are these natural sort of methods more or less effective than the sort of technological solutions that we're finding? For instance, carbon capture is more of a technological solution. We're looking at building entirely new equipment to sort of deal with that challenge. But there are also natural methods of carbon capture, like afforestation and things like that. I'm sure you know a lot more of the nuances of it. So which of these sectors sort of promises efficiency when it comes to dealing with emissions specifically?
Now, that's a good question. Sometimes we try to look at the solution to climate change, and sometimes we try to think of it in the singular. We need such a diverse set of solutions. One of the reasons why the not just the taxonomy for clean tech is so wide, and the impact of climate tech is going to be quite wide, is we're talking about transformation. Like almost every industry is going to be hit. You may not need a clean tech solution, but you may have a logistics function, right? And that has a energy and carbon footprint, for example. Now, in the same way, you mentioned carbon capture versus, for example, carbon credits for afforestation. Both are needed. At least this is a view. It's not a universal view. There are those, in particular, some of the larger groups globally who believe a geoengineering solution can solve most, if not all, of our quote unquote needs for battling climate change. Leaving that out, I think when you think about the same thing, the transformation of industries, the transformation of how we consume, how we look at values that are embedded in our products, you're going to see that we'll need maybe carbon capture. That's something that people are testing, of course. Not so much in India yet. It's very expensive to do those with power plants in particular, but it is starting to come. We did a study recently with the Indian government about a year ago to look at the landscape. So it will come. When we're talking about carbon credits, of course, that's something else for the environmental impact that comes from certain technologies that can be monetized through this thing called credits. It's very popular if you've heard the term Kyoto in the past. That ended, I think, 2009, but we have something called the voluntary carbon markets that are growing. And in fact, this wider term is called, domains called regenerative finance. And we're seeing a lot of interest, a lot of people innovating to connect, for example, the carbon credits that afforestation may generate to not just, a handful of 20 or 50 corporate MNCs, but a whole set of people, whether consumers, small SMEs, wealth management groups, a whole bunch of different potential buyers of these credits, which does require a lot of technology bordering closer to fintech, actually. But yeah, so it's not an either or for sure.
Taking an example of a different sector, something like energy, we've seen massive potential for it to disrupt the climate tech space, but also other industries as a whole. Like the world would look very different if we had a clean energy source that can take up maybe 30% of the energy pie chart. Renewables is definitely growing at a really fast pace. But if we had another sort of nuclear or something that is clean that can take up a considerable portion of that spectrum, we would see industries looking a lot different and emissions also sort of skewing very differently. So correct me if I'm wrong, but the innovation in the energy sector is something that appears to be sort of slow. It's not something that we're seeing big changes in. Is this actually true? And what would you attribute this to? Is it a science and tech takes time problem, or is it something else?
Right. No, that's a great question. And that's the heart of climate change. When you think of it, what is really driving the emissions? There's two big areas. Of course, it's our electricity production. It's lots of it is fossil fuel supported or through fossil fuels. And in another kind of framework, it's transportation. Now, one of the things that most people don't realize, even in the industry, is barring, let's say, a Vietnam or maybe a couple of other countries, renewables have won. Now, what does that mean? In last 10 years in India, 80 or 90% of every new power plant, even 10 years back, was solar or wind. Today it continues, and in the US 10 years ago, 80 to 90%. In fact, wind is so cheap in the US that I know in Texas, many the discoms there, they give the electricity for free at nighttime. It's just too much. Now, so in that sense, we have won the big battle. May not feel like it because the extreme events may still be coming. The trauma or the psychological trauma of thinking about climate change hasn't gone away, but we won one of the biggest battles we could. Our challenge now is to make sure to accelerate that, make sure it doesn't get reversed. These are political decisions. Good thing about India is we're not as political as we seem in this area as much as cash flow oriented. Someone may say, well, wait, electricity is political. Free electricity to farmers, for example, is a common policy tool for many states. But today, you can see the wholesale tenders for solar have been consistently something like 2.25 rupees per kilowatt hour. And in fact, even combined with batteries, I can't remember this. I think it's 3 rupees or something like that, right? With battery, which means you can get a continuous supply similar to a coal plant, etc. Coal, not including carbon tax or carbon pricing, coal, I think for new plants today is nothing under 5 to 6 rupees. And that too, not thinking about the water. The coal plants take a tremendous amount of water. and you're seeing that causes coal plants to shut down as well. So, the government of India, most governments around the world understand this, that the uptake of renewable energies is not a CSR. It's not a sacrifice as much as it seems. It's political still because there's vested interests for sure. So there are fights, but if you win, you are achieving benefits for everyone. That's a huge set of solutions we can focus on, where the benefits of going green are visible to a large number of stakeholders, whether the government, but more importantly, oftentimes citizens and consumers. That gives us staying power.
Yeah.
There's always areas where that's not going to happen, like for example, when we look at wastewater, etc. That's largely public externalities, positive, negative externalities,
Yeah.
and it's easy politically not to charge companies to clean that up because the benefits are not as high, and consumers paying more prices generally do not like sustainability efforts.
Yeah.
So I would say it's positive what's happening in the energy sector. We do need more. You may know 2-3 weeks ago there's another breakthrough in nuclear fusion.
Yes, yes, there was. So yes, we are seeing progress, but it's not what it looks like, and it's not big news all the time, right? A lot of smaller players are making incremental progress in this, and maybe that's not as visible as the stuff we see in papers. Moving to the political and sort of economic drivers of the sector, something like climate solutions. Is it a positive or negative scenario in India? Are we seeing a lot of support in terms of the political will and economic support? Because those were big drivers of even the conversation about climate change. So, how is the landscape in terms of solutions? Is there support where it counts?
One positive in the last 20 years is we, meaning we who live in India, are much more vocal about environment. And that is coming into political pressure. For example, air pollution is something that every government in certain cities has to be cognizant of, or at least be seen showing progress for political reasons, right? 20 years ago, maybe less so, the pressure of that. It would be something in especially English newspaper at best, and that's it. So I think one is across the world, everything seems to be moving in a good direction. Now, having said that, I look at climate solutions in three buckets. The first bucket was those solutions that have a natural business case that makes it easy to implement. Meaning, if it's a corporate, it's not a cost. It actually improves our bottom line. And that's the reason why you'll see shared fleets, shared EV fleets, electric fleets, are something businesses are taking up now, looking at solutions without subsidies. Today, it makes money for them. We're seeing retrofitted auto rickshaws, retrofit, to make them, where the payback is somewhere between, it can be depending on where, 2.5 to 4 years. That's an amazing payback. Ideally, it would be closer to 2 to 3 years, but this is also coming. No subsidies. It's the rickshawala makes money, increases his income from these. So that is happening on its own, and we're going to see this continue in a lot of areas of clean tech or climate tech. There's a second area where especially when it comes to consumer goods, where it's driven by values, right? So what does that mean is I want to buy, without getting into the organic debate, I want to eat something organic because it resonates with my values, what I want, even if the price is higher. In India, we are only seeing the green shoots for this, no pun intended. It's still early days. This requires, 2-3 decades of awareness, community building around these themes. Like, why is it important? People are starting to connect the dots better than they did before. But your fundamental problem of consumption is production in the modern world is hundreds of kilometers away, or even maybe different countries, right? As opposed to in your village. So, but these dots are being connected. We have to kind of continue to increase that awareness. It'll come. I'm seeing like some more and more people solutioning around this space as well, especially in textiles,
Mm.
fashion. We're seeing more alternatives to meat as well. This is still early. We don't know how what the market is. Sometimes markets are discovered because they're latent.
Yeah.
You can't market research the demand for a iPod, back 20 years ago, right? It would have been a no until someone saw it. And the third area is the one we touched upon just a few minutes ago. Is there's certain areas that you will always need to have government policy.
Mhm.
For example, when it comes to biodiversity hotspots, right? Or when we're talking about things like wastewater that gets a strong, diffuse negative externality, painful, but it's tolerable. And the political pressure, the vested interest, the corporate power does not easily create that cauldron. In that cauldron, good policy comes out at the pace we need.
Mhm.
Having said that, what I'm seeing is generally everything though is moving in the right direction. And that's a win in itself.
Yeah.
Now, for many years in the US, after solar was proven to be so cost effective,
Yeah.
at the state level, many states threw out roadblocks, increasing the cost of solar. We have that in India as well. We have that's cross subsidy charges at the state level when many discoms don't want people to switch over to solar and other things. But at least what we're seeing is a recognition even there that this is either inevitable and also good, and
Yeah.
it's more of a transition. Let's figure out how to transition so it's less painful as opposed to fighting it.
So overwhelmingly a good time to be in the climate tech space. There is a lot moving in the right direction, but do you see any gaps in the sort of landscape where there still needs to be a lot of work done? In crypto, for instance, is regulation. Is there something similar in the climate tech space where you see a lot of room for growth?
I think one of the things, at least if we're talking about opportunities for entrepreneurs,
Yeah.
one is that, as I mentioned, what we're seeing around the world is this transformation into sustainability. It's not like a startup sector. We're talking about every industry rethinking increasingly at different degrees. What should we do? For whether it's their logistics, distribution, their plant operations, the values, unfortunately, but also, in my opinion, fortunately, half, maybe 90% of every new real estate building project in Bombay or Bombay area is an eco resort or it has a green value embedded in it. Leaving aside whether it's as green as we'd like, and if it's kind of some maybe I don't think it's greenwashing, but diluted green. The point is that everyone is recognizing that it's a value that consumers, people who buy apartments, wants, and business is responding. So similarly, we see this across industries. We see this across products. So I think one of the things we'll see in India is, we estimate there's about 2,500 clean tech startups, technology side in India. This is a number that will be 10 times by the end of the decade. It'll be our biggest sector, if not in the next 3 to 4 years in terms of number of entrepreneurs, but definitely by the end of the decade, dwarfing everything else for this exact same reason. You may need to find different kinds of solutions for different industries. You may need to find solutions for islands that are different that you thought could work. Microgrids could work in Northeast India or parts of India. Islands have different characteristics, for example. So I think what we need is more. That's one. The second thing, by the way, is that one of the things that there is a deficiency in India is we're not very good at taking innovation from labs to the startup world for many reasons. When I used to do even coaching in Switzerland, 8 out of 10 of the startups were PhD postdocs, and they had their startups. We don't see it here, at least in our programs. And there's many reasons why. One is it's not easy to take 2 years off if you're doing research on a lab. Come back to your lab. You don't have that same flexibility. There's a lot less awareness and training programs for researchers in particular. Even though I know the demand is there because we get so many requests to join our program, but they don't know how to do it because they have this lab work, but they don't know how to come to the startup world. They sometimes send undergraduates to come. It always fails, you know. So one of the things I believe that, and I know the government's looking at this as well, is how do we make our institutes of research more flexible so that we can bring out what is decades of research in dozens and hundreds of institutes across India. More and more of that coming, in fact, even to the startup world. Yeah.
So entrepreneurship courses in most colleges would be a nice first step in that direction. I think teach them right then and there how to get their ideas into sort of motion. Yeah, that would be nice. And the research space does need better communicators as well. I think a lot of the research just goes sort of unnoticed, and we see articles about studies that have made big breakthroughs in the news, but science communication does need to sort of become more popular and diverse. Maybe more creators that are talking about science in the space would be nice. Climate tech creators would be nice too. They'll all come around. Yeah.
Yeah.
Lastly, Pratap, I would love to know what you love about your job. Maybe you could tell us what you enjoy about what you do.
Well, I'm gonna take another angle, and first is why I find it meaningful. When I started in climate tech in 2009, I was a solar developer, and that was at the very beginning of the national solar mission. And there was like 1 megawatt that was injected into the grid. Now there's 60,000 megawatts of solar or something. So I started, and people used to come to me in the first few years, say, you know what, that's very noble what you're doing. You know, solar is so good for the environment and all this stuff. I mean, I didn't say much in response. I always, though, scratched my head thinking, I'm trying to sell solar at this price, really high, make it this price low, and pocket the difference. You know, it just happened that it was good for the environment, but it was not my driver, right? So it was more something I was doing. Then I had a couple of kids about 8 years ago, 9 years ago, and everything became more meaningful for me, right? I used to think about, climate, environment in other ways, like, like the loss of big animals. That kind of in particular made me a little sad, but it was still something I could compartmentalize. I can go and finish reading that and move on to my life. When I had kids, it changed. I said, I need to do something for them, right? Because I don't want them to live in a world that we give them because of apathy or indifference. And so when I moved to this in 2016, it was inevitable. It was climate in some way. It just happened to be climate entrepreneurship because my background, I've been an entrepreneur for a long time. I supported entrepreneurs in the past. It was a natural fit for me. And maybe two decades too late to go and get a PhD anyway. But we can all find that area, if that's in whatever impact area, and try to leverage where we come from and that then play our role. So it's more that it's really meaningful for me. When I first started, first 4 years, there was no money, zero, like most nonprofits. We used to get 1 or 2 lakh checks from very large organizations because no one was really didn't care too much, at least when in the work that we were doing. But it didn't matter. That didn't stop me, because once you have a mission, you're driven or consumed by the mission. All problems are to be solved. There's no, why me? Why aren't people understanding? You are driven just to move forward. It's just this fortunate now that we've seen so many people in the last few years in India start to realize, hey, this is something we all need, and it's across. We've seen people caring more than it did. We're seeing it. It's the awareness in the newspapers. We're seeing government policy shifting to it, and corporates as well. And we're seeing the MySpace, the venture side, venture capital. It's the hottest area in India as well. The last couple of years, and now it's easier than it was. But so I don't have the same problems, but I have the same mission. So it just turns out, Kavya, I also enjoy it. I love working with entrepreneurs. I love helping them. I can see why teachers get such satisfaction. The joy of seeing someone, start somewhere and you played a role to help them get to somewhere else. I kind of feel like that as well, as since we do work in particular with very early stage entrepreneurs.
Thank you, Pratap. I think that gives us a really good sort of overview of what's happening in the sector and what the flux is and what climate solutions really are and what you do. So thank you for doing the work you do. I think a lot of people will benefit from it in the years and decades to come. And yeah, we'll speak to some of your startups as well, the people you're actually working with, because they're doing some great work and changing the face of climate change action in real time. So yeah, thank you so much
Right.
and talk to you again soon.
Thank you, Kavya.
Yeah.
Always a pleasure.